Everybody hear me? Yep. Okay. You can't hear the microphone from up here. Thank you, Stephanie. That was a wonderful keynote. I was nervous being the first presentation right after the keynote, especially when what I'm talking about is a rather technical topic, not quite as exciting as the topic you covered, but let me go ahead and begin by giving some background on what I'm going to talk about. I used to be one of the educators with Live Water Solutions, and during that time, I was going and training a lot of public libraries as well as academic and special libraries. And there was a course reserves module that was created. As I was training public libraries, they would see that and think of that as a tool that they did not need appropriately. Most public libraries don't have courses and use course reserves. But I also was always given the question, how can we better manage our displays? Public libraries do a lot of ongoing displays. You have your seasonal displays, your topical displays, gardening, African American history, those types of displays that come up every year constantly. And so I started thinking there's got to be a way to take the course reserves and just use some jQuery to tweak that on the public side and make it more useful to a public library. Some of the benefits to using the course reserves for this, of course, is you can spend a lot of time building that display. So, for example, if you know African American history is the same month every year, you can take the year, build your display without affecting any of the material. Without actually moving anything, you can use your course reserves for that. I'm not going to go into teaching you how to use course reserves. There's lots of great tutorials out there for you to do that. That's just some background on what got me thinking about this. So the first thing I did is I looked at the OPAC and where course reserves appears. As you can see, course reserves appears on the main area right there. We needed to change that. So I just put together some basic jQuery to change it to display. I said, this is going to be easy. Well, as all projects, as you jump down the rabbit hole, turned out the course reserves text appears in a lot of other places, and there are a lot of other things that tie into course reserves that we don't need for displays. So the next level down, I went ahead and created some courses and gave them display names, as you can see. And I discovered that we've got course here, we've got course in the breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs was a fun one to try to hide. So I went ahead and played with some jQuery, did that, went ahead and left the search, moved display there. Also, there is the issue of all of these different departments, course numbers, things like that appear with course reserves. Things you don't need for a public library setting. So I went ahead and hid all of those items. Following that, I went down to the next level, the actual display itself. So once again, in course reserves, we have a bunch of information in here. We've got course numbers, instructors, all of these things, none of which pertain to the public library, so I had to figure out ways to hide those, which was fairly easier than the first step. Went ahead and did that, then discovered that there are a few things on the actual record in the holdings table that I wanted to change as well. So I went ahead and changed course reserves over here, turned it into the display. So when a patron does the search, they look for an item, they will see that it's on display right here and there. Tells them you can, of course, use your locations to define your displays. This took a lot of steps of a number of different, jQuery things. I've got all the jQuery up here. We can look at it, but I don't think everybody's that interested in it. I have posted it on the library, on the jQuery library, so anybody is welcome to look at it. One of the things that I have not done yet, I went ahead and posted it as in progress because I've not touched the stat line yet. My idea was, and I really liked one of the things that Stephanie mentioned early on, you know, you're paid to be there. We can train you to do this. So it was easier, I think it's easier to train the staff to convert that internally than it is for me to write all the code to change that. But I will eventually work on that as things go. That's basically my presentation. It's just kind of what I've done here. Is there any questions about it? How does anybody think this could be useful in their public setting? Yes, got it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm completely new to Koha, so all of you might know the answer to this question already, but would this be where if a teacher came in and was like, I want to know what those books were on that display you had last year in February, could they use this to find that information themselves?
If you were using course reserves, yes, you could do that. Once you've added things to a course, and I've not gone into how to use course reserves. That's a whole 30-minute presentation into itself. But within that course, you add the material to that course, and then you have the ability to enable it and unenable it, to turn it on and off. And that is what I think gives the library the flexibility to build those displays outside of the time the display is being used. So you're not modifying the records at that time. You're adding them to a course and then using the functionality of course reserves. So yes, they could then go back in and see what was in that course or display.
Hi, you answered a little bit my question, but I wanted to know more about the workflow for the staff, I guess the librarians or the other staff people who take care of putting on the displays. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. Do you have Koha on here where I can look at it? I think it'd be easier to show it than, or I'll talk while we look at this.
Yeah.
The basic workflow is going to be the librarian who's building the display is whatever means they need. Whatever means they need to decide what books are going to be on this display. That would be their first step. So they start to do their searching in the catalog, decide what's going to be part of this display. Then they would go into the course reserves, which is not on. Not my setup. This would take a little setup on the back end. So they would go into course reserves. From within there, they would create a new course for a new display, or they would edit their existing display. So they would open up the new course, once again, translate course to display, give it a name, a name and a number. That's really all they need to do here because the rest of this information only really pertains to course reserves. Once they've saved that, they have a course that they can come in here and start adding items to. So what they can do is add the items one at a time, or they could come in here and add them. That doesn't have the batch edit on it. There will be the batch edit where you could add a bunch of items at one time. The nice thing here is they can declare it active or inactive. If it is inactive, then the course will not show up, the display would not show up on the display page. It would be hidden. Once it's active, then it would be displaying. As they're adding things to the collection, we have a barcode I can use. Let's.
Those are all oversized books, right?
Sure. Sorry, I was just getting to a barcode. Once you've gotten the barcode of the item, the nice thing about course reserves here is you can have it automatically change its item type. So if your displays used a separate item type, you can set that in here. If your displays used a separate collection code, you could set that. You could set a separate shelving location if you had multiple shelving locations for multiple displays. Holding library, if you wanted to move the material from one location to another, then any kind of notes. Once you save that, then it would add that to the display. If it's active, it's going to make all those changes. If it's inactive, it's not going to make those changes. It's going to leave it like it is. Once you turn it active, it'll flip all those switches. So you just have to collect all that stuff, make it active, and then you have that display ready to go. She's coming from behind you.
So then the actual at the circulation desk in and out process would be the next thing that my staff would ask about. So our problem with displays right now is when I check it in, it just goes back to the shelf. Does using course reserves help the book actually go back to your African American history display?
Yes, it would go back to the display. It would not go back to its home location. Because it's on reserve, it's always going back to that reserve status until you turn off that, until you make that display inactive.
Yeah, that was sort of my question as well. So just so I understand, the book gets checked in and it's flagged as on reserve when the staff sees it. Is that how they know to go back to the reserves? Or
Yes. For example, I'm going to grab one of these books that's in this particular. Let's go ahead and check this in. This is currently on a course reserve. So when I check it in, because this didn't have any kind of display information, it's not going to pop up a message. It's just going to be, wherever that display is.
So if it had a different shelving location before, then when you turn it off, it goes back to the.
It goes back to its
shelving
original
location?
shelving location.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Like I said, this was not quite as exciting a topic as Stephanie's, but it's usable work.
As an academic library, we have both displays and course reserves. So in your example, you changed the reserve to display. Would you recommend just building displays in the course reserves? Would they be searchable then? Or would you create another, headline for displays?
I have not considered using both. My use case was to look at it for public libraries. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure of an easy way to do that outside of retitle things to both. But I think that might be more confusing to the end user.
Thank you.
I was just trying to think of a way around that. How about if you just make it clear in the name of the course that it is a display, not a course? And just,
Yes, that's kind of that might work. When you're setting up the course itself.
of course, then you'd have to have your users understand that display in all caps means it's a display and not a course.
Exactly, that's it's not a course on displays.
Yes. I get that all the time.
All right, anything else? Nope.
Forward to that question, how much does the public use display? Do academics, both, but it seems more of a staff management tool, which is really helpful, as opposed to like, does your public actually like go into your OPAC and search what's on display today, or?
No, the public generally does not, but the idea behind it to me was for staff management as well as, let me come back here in my slides. On that very first opening screen, it allows them to see a link directly to all the displays. So they could use it a little more. Yes. Yes, this was to make staff's management of those easier. In a way that was user-friendly to the customer. All right, anything else? All right, thank you.